All right, what is the glycemic index, and is it a useful tool at all when it comes to designing a nutrition plan, whether we're talking about weight loss or sports performance here? So, the glycemic index was created as a way to look at how a specific food affects blood sugar 2 hours after you consume 50 grams of that specific food by itself. And there's a few things worth mentioning here when we're considering looking at glycemic index and using that as a tool. Um, One is that they've normalized it for 50 grams. Not all of the foods that we consume, uh, we would normally consume 50 grams. So, for example, 50 grams of white rice is a pretty typical serving size that we might eat. But 50 grams from carrots is not typical. You would have to eat a pail of carrots. And there's people out there that are looking at this going, well, boiled carrots are better than, higher glycemic index than raw carrots. So carrots are fine. You can eat carrots. Don't worry about it. You're only going to consume a few carrots. We're not talking about 50 grams of carrots. So that's one thing to consider. And the other is that the test was performed eating this one food by itself on an empty stomach. And this is not how we typically eat, right? So 50 grams of white rice by itself spikes the blood sugar pretty good. 50 grams of white rice with 40 grams of chicken breast and 20 grams of fat from avocado oil is going to have a drastically different effect on blood sugar, and it's going to slow down the absorption of any carbohydrates when you consume it with protein and fat, or just other foods in general. And this is not accounted for when we just look at the glycemic index number. So there's more to the story here. So is it a useful tool? Yeah, it's one of the many things we look at when we're designing diets, but it's not like the holy grail of whether or not this is a good food or a good carbohydrate source to eat, and whether or not carbohydrates going in you fast is a bad thing is a topic for maybe another video, because there are some times when you would want carbohydrates to go in more quickly. If you're an athlete and you've just competed in an event, you're a bodybuilding or physique competitor, you've just lifted weights, then having some carbohydrates that go into the blood quickly so that your muscles can soak up that muscle glycogen is perfectly valid and probably a good thing. And so high glycemic index doesn't mean bad necessarily. But let's just say that most people in the general fitness world would consider slower absorbing carbohydrates to be better. And I suppose we could make this general statement. So, lower the glycemic index, the slower it's going to go into the bloodstream, but also consider how many grams of carbohydrates are actually in the food you're eating. There might not be 50, and so it's not such a big deal. And are you eating this with other foods? Because that's going to slow it down too. So, how does the glycemic index work? Now you know.